before they're able to join, but they will be here shortly.
Libby, should we proceed?
Yes, sir. Let's go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Representative Gonzales and Cuellar will be here shortly, but we're here to announce bipartisan and bicameral legislation to address the crisis currently occurring at the U.S.-Mexico border. The reason why I think it's important for border congressman and a United States senator from a border state to introduce this legislation is because we've actually talked to the people most directly affected by this crisis. We've talked to the stakeholders, we've talked to the Border Patrol, we've talked to our mayors, county judges, and local communities about how they view this crisis and how they think we might best address it. And I think one of the things that's so surprising to people who don't have a lot of familiarity with the border is that much of the problems that we're experiencing today is a result of policies introduced by Congress, passed by Congress, or consent decrees and judgments that really tie the hands of our law enforcement personnel in dealing with illegal immigration along the border. I think many people have the idea that the Border Patrol is there to repel people who are trying to run away from them. The fact is, migrants are running toward the Border Patrol so they can turn themselves in. And they're doing it with unprecedented numbers. Director Mayorkas has said we're seeing a surge that's as high as any we've had in the last 20 years. The truth is the human smugglers that make millions of dollars, roughly $5,000 a person, more from Central America, more even from other parts of the world, that they are getting rich by gaming our system. They understand the loopholes in our laws, and they know that if they get somebody to the border and they claim asylum, that we've flooded the zone, they've flooded the zone so much that our Border Patrol will, number one, be taken offline to take care of unaccompanied children, for example, leaving drug smugglers huge gaps in our border security in our front line where the drug smugglers exploit that gap. And so the decision to bring unaccompanied children here is very conscious on the part of these criminal organizations because it helps them make money and execute their business model. So listening to those who understand this problem best, Congressman Cuellar, Congressman Gonzales, and I, and we'll have another announcement later on with the Democratic senator, so we'll truly have bipartisan, bicameral support for this legislation. It's called the Bipartisan Border Solutions Act. And briefly, what it would do is it would create 4 new regional processing centers for high traffic areas during surges. Why is that important? Well, for the reason I just said, that Border Patrol is overwhelmed at the border. They're taken offline in order to deal with the children and other challenges. And then you've seen just the sheer volume of migrants coming across in less than ideal circumstances. And particularly put a pandemic on top of it. And that's why we call this a crisis. So they would be processed at these regional processing centers. They would be given the means to understand what our laws are and an opportunity to present any legitimate claims for asylum there at the regional processing centers. Right now, the coyotes and the human smugglers, the cartels, understand that we have about a 2.5-year backlog on immigration cases. And what that means is that people are released based on their promise to return at a future date for their court hearing. But because of the backlog and the overwhelming number of cases, they don't ever show up again. And so basically US laws and our inadequate system at the border complete the job that the smugglers initiated in moving people from their homes through a very dangerous journey through Mexico, say from Central America. And then the US government accomplishes that last bit because of the problems we're seeing at our border. We want to reduce wait times for people who have legitimate claims and give them an opportunity to present their claim to a immigration judge. We want to hire more immigration judge teams and asylum officers so that we can process these claims at the border. And we want to prioritize certain claims, for example, with unaccompanied children. So we reduce the need to catch and release these individuals. And finally, we need to deter illegal immigration where someone doesn't have a legitimate claim for asylum or some other immigration benefit. This is the message, this is a consistent message that I've gotten, and I'm sure Tony and Henry have heard the same thing. Right now, there are no consequences to illegally coming to our border and entering our country because they've simply overwhelmed our capacity to deal with it and exploiting these gaps and these quirks in our underlying asylum laws and the inability to process even legitimate claims for asylum at the border, which is part of what we want to do. Well, I see my friend Tony Gonzales here, and I think Henry's voting as well, but I'll turn it over to you, Tony, for any remarks you want to make, and then Henry, and then we'll answer or dodge a few questions.
Great. Thank you, Senator. And I want to first start off and thank you for your leadership on this topic. You know, right now, the country is divided in many ways, but this is an area that not one person, not one party can solve alone. We all have to come together, and this bill is what at the heart of does that. You know, adding 4 regional processing centers is critical to us solving this issue. You know, putting Border Patrol agents, taking Border Patrol agents out of the processing business and putting them back in the national security business is what this bill gets to the heart of. Also, what I think is important, look, I'm a father of 6. I visited, as all of us, you know, as Senator Cornyn and Congressman Cuellar, we visited many of these facilities. And it is heartbreaking to see the sheer number of children that are having to go through here. What worries me is once they leave these facilities, what happens to them then? You know, are they going to be a forgotten generation of children? We don't want to see that happening. We want to see, you know, the follow-up that takes place to ensure, you know, once they get to their destination, their sponsor's destination, that it is a safe home. That is important to us. The other part of it, before I turn it over to Congressman Cuellar, is you know, adding judges on the border. That's key. That's critical to it all. Look, while many of the cases may not meet the criteria for fear, there are some that do. And I think it's important that we have a process that is timely, you know, that their claims are they're given every opportunity to have these claims. And part of that is having more judges. 150 additional, at least 150 additional judges is critical to solving this problem. I thank you again, Senator, for your leadership on this. And I thank my good friend, Henry Cuellar, for always being helpful and willing to have a conversation to tackle this. Because the bottom line, my district is 820 miles of border. Henry's district is border, you know, as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Congressman Cuellar.
Tony, if I can say before Henry speaks, Henry, I think people might want to know that this builds on legislation that you and I introduced in 2017 called the Humane Act. And the reason why I think it was appropriately named is the status quo is dangerous in anything but humane for these very vulnerable migrants. So Henry, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Senator. And again, I also want to thank you for your leadership. You know, you've been working on this. Both of us have been working on this for a while, and this is not our first rodeo. We saw the surge in 2014, 2019, and here we are in 2021. So I want to thank you for being very proactive. I know that one of your colleagues, a Democratic colleague, Krista Sinema, is also part of this bill also. So I also want to thank her also. On the House side, Tony, it's a pleasure. You and I will be working together on the appropriations, and I want to thank you for your work and the good work that we're going to be doing together in a bipartisan way with our leader, Senator John Cornyn. Look, we got to have a sense of urgency. We can either just wait and just let the numbers just keep coming, or do we get a sense of urgency and do something? We got to try something. We cannot just wait here and just look at what I call the input and the output. I mean, the input is just simply the numbers are coming in very large numbers, in such large numbers that, as you know, I mean, even some of the folks are not even being put in the immigration system. The notice, they're not given notice to appear. I think as of a couple of days ago, over 15,300 people had just been released on what I call the honor system. And that honor system is just basically what we call it Form 385, where there are ads that in 60 days they find the closest ICE office and report to them, but they're not part of the system itself. And that shows you how overworked our Border Patrol agents are being. So we have this input, people coming in large numbers, and then the output part of it, can we move them faster? Because Border Patrol facilities are not a place to hold, especially the young kids. Sometimes, as you know, they're supposed to be there 72 hours, but they've been there 10 or even more than 20 days at a time. So you're looking at them coming in and staying there for longer. So the output, how we work with HSS and of course the Office of Refugee Resettlement is going to be important. The bottom line is we're trying something. And I think the concepts that we have is well thought of. We got some concepts that are common sense, and we want to give it a try. And we hope that the administration will work with us, and both Democrats and Republicans will support this, because just keeping the status quo is not working. And that's not the way we ought to be. We cannot be reactive. We got to be proactive. And this is what this legislation is all about. So again, Senator Cornyn, thank you for your leadership. And Tony, also, it's a pleasure working with you. And again, thank you for all of y'all for being present today.
Well, let me just emphasize a point that Henry made. It's easy to say, well, this isn't everything I want, especially in a very difficult and complex area like immigration. And of course, we've been through the immigration battles here on Capitol Hill a long time. But it's not enough to criticize what other people have proposed to try to solve a problem. If you've got a better idea, come forward with one. But this is truly unique, at least in these very polarized and contentious times, where you have a bipartisan, bicameral proposal, and it's based on very practical advice that's been given to us by Border Patrol and Health and Human Services, the non-governmental organizations that try to help these folks at the border. And so if somebody's got a better idea, we're all ears. But in the meantime, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Well said.
Thank you all. With that, we'll open it up to some questions. And let's start here with KRGV's Santiago Saicedo. Go ahead, Santiago, ask your question.
Hey, good morning. Can everyone see me, hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Something that, we're talking about bipartisan solutions to the migrant surge. And this reminds me of the visit on April 12th, around that date. Vicente Gonzalez was here. I know you mentioned, of course, processing centers, of course, here in the US, but what about processing centers near Guatemala or on the border, southern border of Mexico? Is that included? And also, just for viewers, they've heard now, like I said, this is the second type of bipartisan solution. How do you kind of explain this one compared to that one? Are these the two same things? What's the difference?
Well, I'll start by just saying, Santiago, that this is a beginning, not the end. We're hopeful that these discussions on immigration and border security can continue. As a matter of fact, there was some bipartisan meetings last night. Senator Dick Durbin, the Democratic Majority Whip, convened a hearing, a bipartisan meeting of senators, and we've agreed to continue to try to build on the things that we can agree on. But until we get this under a little bit better control, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to move other substantive immigration legislation. I'm not saying the problem has to go away, but we certainly have to manage it better. And I think Henry's right. The administration, when they realize that what they're doing now is not working, we'd like to give them a soft place to land. And this is, as I said, the only bicameral bipartisan bill. And so we're hoping that this will provoke a desire on the part of the administration to work with us. But this is just the beginning.
Yes, Santiago, I'll chime in and just say what makes this different is it's not only bipartisan, but it's bicameral. We have to get it through the House and the Senate. Otherwise, it's kind of dead on the vine. So this is the first bill that does both of that.
And Santiago, I was there with you're referring to the problem solvers. I was with them on Sunday and wasn't there on Monday. And I know what you're talking about. Look, the way we address this issue is I call it in three parts. One part is what do you do outside the US, which is basically in the what we call the foreign operation aspect of it. What do we do with that? As you know, Mexico is now looking at setting up children's shelters up there in the southern part. So they're already looking, and we've been in communication with the Mexicans as to the work that they're doing. So what we do over there, the foreign aid, and it's not only the money, we also got to deal with them, work with them. You know, they want to, they want investment, foreign investments, they want jobs down there. So that's the other aspects before we get in. The second part is what do we do in the border? And that's one part of this bill. But the third part is once they're out of the border and they're in the ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which this bill deals with also, that's the third part. So this bill basically deals with number 2 and number 3. The third part, of course, is something that the senator and I and Tony and others will be working on the appropriations as to what sort of assistance we provide, what sort of metrics we send, because we have given them $3.6 billion. Oh, well, I'll take it back. We have appropriated $3.6 billion since 2016, but some of that is still stuck in the State Department and USAID for reasons that I can explain. But those are the things that we have to look at. So this deals, let's put it in 3 buckets. This deals with 2 buckets out of the 3 buckets. And this is the very important part that we're dealing with here in the US.
Thank you all. Next, we have a question from Morgan Burrell from KABB WAI in San Antonio. Morgan, go ahead.
Hey there, good morning. At last check, there were about 1,931 unaccompanied migrant children here in care at the San Antonio Emergency Intake Site. And on Tuesday, HHS told us they only had 13 total reunifications at the site since it opened on March 29th. If this bill is passed, how quickly do you anticipate we'll see results here?
Well, obviously, this proposes a new process, which, as Tony explained, that would allow the Border Patrol to stay on the front line to repel illegal immigration and illegal drugs coming into the United States, and then transfer these migrants to a place where they can be processed and given an opportunity to present their claims of credible fear for asylum purposes, and hopefully an immigration judge at some point. So the problem with the current situation is the Border Patrol's told me they can't build enough capacity to keep ahead of this problem. And obviously with the allegations that occurred at the Joe Freeman Coliseum of sexual assault, unsupervised teenage boys, which is very serious. I think our standard always has to be what's in the best interest of these children. And but it is not in the best interest of these children to attract them to make that long and perilous and maybe deadly journey from their country of origin, and then come to the United States only to find that they don't have legitimate claims for asylum under US law. But those who do, we want to make sure they have that opportunity to present that claim quickly. So our hope is that we will reduce the need for those sort of detention facilities, which seem to pop up overnight without much consultation and communication with local leaders. It seems to be a fairly consistent habit of Health and Human Services, but we understand everybody's trying to do their best and being overwhelmed.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Justin Cree with KFOX and CBS 4 in El Paso. Justin, go ahead. All right, we'll come back to Justin. How about, is James Paluffa with Univision San Antonio on the call?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you, James.
Yes, so thank you for your time. Let me start recording on my end here because I'm not able to record through your link. I wanted to ask Mr. Cuellar en español if we could give us the gist of the proposal.
Sí, cómo no. Lo que queremos hacer es tener un proceso donde podemos tener justicia para las personas que están entrando, porque ahorita se tarda mucho tener una audiencia frente de un juez. Por eso queremos poner 150 jueces nuevos. Por eso queremos tener un proceso donde pueden tener su día frente de un juez. Y donde no van a estar esperando por mucho tiempo en los centros del Border Patrol, porque no deben de estar ahí más de 3 días. Y lo que queremos hacer es, estamos con una propuesta, porque ahorita sabemos que hay un problema, pero nosotros, demócratas, republicanos, el senador Cornyn, Tony Gonzales, Kristen Sinema, demócrata, senador de Arizona, tenemos una propuesta y si hay mejores ideas allá, pues estamos listos para trabajar con esas personas, pero necesitamos una manera de tratar a esos inmigrantes justos abajo de la ley. Pero lo voy a hacer este punto que es importante. Si una persona va frente de un juez, si hay 100 personas, de 100 personas, 88 personas se van a negar. Nomás 12 van a poder entrar a los Estados Unidos. That last point, if I can say that in English, for the ones that didn't understand, we're trying to give folks a fair process before an immigration judge. But keep in mind that if somebody goes before an immigration judge, let's say you have 100 people, according to the immigration judges, they will tell you that out of 100, 88% are going to be rejected, and only 12% will be accepted. So that's why we want to give them their day in court, and the ones that are allowed in, we say bienvenidos. But the other ones, the law says that they might have to be returned. I mean, that's what the law is.
Thank you, Congressman. It looks like Justin Cree has joined us. So Justin, if you want to go ahead and ask your question, Justin's with KFOX and CBS 4 in El Paso.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay, but my question is, what is the new target goal for the time you were talking about the asylum seekers? What is the new target goal in regards to the asylum seekers, and how is it different than now? Is this a realistic goal as more undocumented migrants enter into the country?
Well, I'll start with that. As we said, right now, the average wait time for a hearing in front of an immigration judge is 2.5 years. There's about 1.2 million backlog cases. And as you've heard from Henry and others, it's so overwhelmed the system, many people are being released without even a notice to appear for their hearing based on the honor system. It's not working, and we've got to do something to fix that. Again, our goal is to try to provide a humane and dignified way to treat these migrants. If they've got a bona fide case, then let them present it to the appropriate US government official. And in the meantime, try to keep them safe and protected. But if they can't meet the legal requirements for it, then they'll have to be returned to their country of origin. That's one of the things, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, where the Border Patrol says right now there's no consequences associated with entering the United States illegally. And so we need to show that there are consequences while at the same time demonstrating our humanity and willingness to provide migrants who do qualify for this immigration benefit, the opportunity to do so as soon as possible.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Sean Talbot with KSAT in San Antonio. Sean, go ahead.
Thank you all for doing this today. Got a few questions here. One, talk about these regional centers. Has there been ideas to where these centers are going to go? What's going to be the cost to put these centers in place? Are they going to be permanent? Are they going to be temporary shelters? What's that situation going to be? Also, I think previously, Senator, you talked about moving some of these immigration judges to the border to kind of speed up the asylum claims. Is that still on the books? And finally, I also wanted to get all of your thoughts on the news that Vice President Harris is planning to visit the Northern Triangle in June. Is that something she should be doing now and not waiting until June? In fact, she hasn't even, no one from the White House has gone to the border during this whole situation. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that as well.
Well, let me just answer the last one, and I'll kick it over to Tony and to Henry for the rest. Obviously, the countries that are sending us their people, their citizens, are part of this puzzle that we need to solve. But for me, I would say I'm a little skeptical at our ability to do nation building. We've tried to do that before, and it's hard to do. I think we probably haven't been very successful since World War II and the Marshall Plan, certainly not in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so you can't want something for people that they don't want for themselves. We can help, we can support, we can provide them more training and support, but right now, I think that's just a small piece of the puzzle. We're trying to focus on what we think is the most important and most overlooked feature, which is the fact that coyotes have figured out our laws and how to exploit them, both in a way that both endanger the American people and also are harmful to the migrant who might otherwise have a valid asylum claim, but they simply don't appear for their hearing in front of the immigration judge a year or 2 years or 3 years later, and they just get a default order of deportation, even if they had an arguable claim. So Tony, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you, Senator. And the bottom line is people need help now. Like, we need relief today. And these processing centers get to the heart of that. Where exactly these processing centers are will be located at, is yet to be determined. But there's some areas that make sense. Look, RGV is the #1 area as far as migrants. The Del Rio sector is the #2 area. But across our southern border, they need help. That's one. The other area, the other critical area that is needed now is these immigration judges. Infusing 150 plus immigration judges to the equation allows some immediate relief, some immediate processing in a manner that is in line with our legal system, that gives every opportunity to vet claims and to give that process, but it speeds it up. Like, we need people on the border, and this situation, we need help today. And that's exactly what this bill covers.
Henry, I know you're very active in the Appropriations Committee in the House, and you probably have some of those numbers in front of you, what the U.S. taxpayer is paying right now to process and to take care of these migrants. And I don't think any of us know exactly what the cost of the regional processing centers might be, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the stimulus check that people got, it was $1,400. When we set up those emergency centers, like we've been setting them up in different parts of the country, they will cost about $775, let's say $800. So in 2 days, to keep one child for just 2 days, we spend more money than what the Americans got on their stimulus check, just to give you a perspective. They usually go for about $260 a day, but when it's an emergency, the federal government has a way of paying a little bit more than what I think they should pay. So it's very expensive. So all you have to do is just do the math of the thousands of kids that we have. and how long they're there. When a kid is child is put in a shelter, they're put in 4 categories. The first category is number 1, that is trying to find their mother, the mother or the father. They usually are there for an average of 27 days. Then the second category is when they're put trying to find a brother or sister. That's the second category. That's about the same time. Then the third category is trying to find a distant relative, and that might go up to 30-something plus days. The fourth category is when a child has no relatives, no sponsor, and they will be there about 127 days average. So do the math that I just gave you, and if they're in a shelter where they're paying $800 a day, that would give you an idea multiplied by the thousands of folks that we have there. On the judges, I've told Tony Gonzales that I want to be supportive, that I think we got to get those judges on the border. And it's been difficult under the Obama administration, under the Trump administration. It was difficult for them to understand, because when we've added judges in the past, they move them to the cities where the people are released. And I think that's backwards. And what we ought to do is put them at the border so we can have the day in court. And if they have to be returned, they're right there at the border. So whether we add judges in Eagle Paso, Del Rio, Laredo, and other places, we need to have them at the border. And that's common sense.
Thank you, Congressman. Next, we have a question from Jack Fink with CBS 11 in Dallas-Fort Worth. Jack, go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody doing this. I guess, is this really like a one-stop shop where you have people sheltering there, you have judges there, all in these regional centers? And my other question is, and you brought this up before about it being in both the Senate and the House with bipartisan support, how are you all going to get this across the finish line?
Well, yeah, I think, Jack, what we're thinking about is twofold with regard to the regional processing centers. One is right now the local border patrol are overwhelmed, and you've seen these centers where people are packed in like sardines, and that's particularly not safe during a time of a pandemic. But it's not fair. It's not humane to these children in particular. And so by processing them and sending them to a place where they can have more room and have the benefit of all the various U.S. government officials and non-governmental organizations to help walk them through the process, we think that's a better system for them. And it also gives them an opportunity to present their claim to hopefully a federal government official, so they know whether they have a chance of staying in the United States or going back. But I think Tony alluded to this. The other part of this is right now, the Border Patrol are going off the front lines to take care of the kids. And of course, we all want to make sure these children, while they're in our country, are well taken care of. But what that means is it creates a real hole in our border security system that's exploited by the drug smugglers and human migrant smugglers. You know, we lost 88,000 Americans to drug overdoses in the last 12 months, 88,000. 92% of the heroin that comes to the United States comes from Mexico. Obviously, methamphetamine, fentanyl that's, comes through Mexico and from around the world. So that's the reason why we need to keep the Border Patrol on the front lines, providing for our national security. We need to get the children in a safe place where they can be held while they are being processed and perhaps have an ability to make any legitimate claim for asylum. I think that's certainly the concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And Border Patrol, once again, they need help today. And these processing centers do that. Here's the other thing is the Border Patrol agents are having to spend money out of their operational budget to currently run these soft-sided processing centers. I just visited one in Eagle Pass. There, they told me an estimate of $25 million a quarter was coming out of their operational budget. That's wrong. We got to find a solution to that. This bill gets to the part of that. Now, as far as getting it over the finish line, once again, this is the only bill that has both bipartisan support in the House and in the Senate. And the bottom line is this: there's a lot of members that have come out and visited the border. That's fantastic. But now we have to do something about it, right? We have to move forward. That's what this bill does. It starts that conversation on let's now do something about it today, not a year from now, but today, right? Immediately start moving through it.
And Henry, Henry went through the first 1 through 4 categories of sponsors with whom these children are placed. Right now, we have concerns about the welfare of these children who are placed with sponsors, maybe not even a family member, and there's no follow-up. And so we want to make sure there's additional vetting and additional follow-up to protect these children from people who mean them to exploit them or do them harm. And that's part of what this bill does.
Yeah, and if I can just add one more thing, Senator, you know, I don't think this has been discussed, but it probably will be. Probably the next few months, you know, the administration is going to ask us for a supplemental in the amounts of billions and billions of dollars to put money in Homeland, put money in HSS because of this surge. The reason I think I know this is going to happen is because we saw that 2014 with Obama, 2019 under Trump, and we got another surge. And as you know, the months of March, April, May, June are the high peaks, the peak points of crossings. And so there will be a request for additional. So what we're trying to do is find a more efficient way that's fair to the migrants, but still save monies to the taxpayers' dollars.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Robert Arnold with KPRC in Houston. Robert, go ahead with your question.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time to do this. I'd like to follow up on the question. I understand that you all are very hopeful that this has bipartisan support, but can you give a realistic time frame as if this does pass, when these processing centers could start being in place? And my second question is, if this does not pass, has any thought been given on how to address not just the backlog in immigration court, but also the backlog in citizenship in immigration services as well? Because we're hearing from people who are LPRs, they wanted to become citizens, they filed their applications, but there's such a backlog there now that their LPR status, they've gone out of status, waiting to hear about their citizenship status. So I didn't know if there's any talk about addressing those backlogs as well.
Well, Robert, I'll start. It's hard to give you a timeline. Henry and I have been in the Congress a while. Tony's a recent addition and welcome addition. But we've been fighting these battles, as Henry said, during different administrations, Republicans and Democrats alike. So we got to get a presidential signature on a bill before it actually is authorized. Then we need to appropriate the money in order to pay for some of this. So I don't think it's really possible to give you a timeline. We're glad to see such a positive response already to what we proposed. Again, as we've said, if somebody's got a better idea, we're all ears. But we have a lot of work to do in this space, and I've worked in it the entire time I've been in the Senate, and it's endlessly frustrating because it's so hard and so complex. But that doesn't mean we can give up. We have to keep trying. And yes, you're right. There's other aspects of our immigration system beyond what's happening at the border, like legal permanent residents who want to adjust their status. They're entitled to do so, but they're crowded out because of the crisis at the border. We need to address the crisis first, so that we can then get back to fairly normal operating procedures. But again, we're not going to stop here. But this is where we think we should start.
And if I can add this, or Tony, if you want to go next, but let me just add this quickly, is, you know, Senator Cornyn and I and Tony, we always plan for Plan A and Plan B. Plan A, of course, is this bipartisan legislation that we're going to push very hard to get done. But as you know, anytime you talk about immigration, just look at the history of immigration reform in the United States, and it's always very difficult. Even the simple things, common sense like this bill, should be able to pass. But at the same meantime, I think Plan B will be the appropriation bills because, we have added some judges in the past. We want to add more judges. The one-stop center, I feel very confident that we can get that done again. And I say again because there was something that we did pass the House a couple years ago. And there are, this is our Plan A. We're going to do everything possible, but I will work with Senator John Cornyn, Krista Sinema, and of course, my friend Tony Gonzales, because there's some parts, not all of it, but some parts that we can add in the appropriation bills. For example, we can add money for more judges. We've done that. We created the border processing folks, which are what I call the entry-level positions. So Border Patrol are not babysitting or cooking food, and you have this border processing. In fact, I was there this couple of weeks ago when the first class of the border processing folks graduated from Artesia. And we need to add more asylum officers. We can do that in the appropriations, more case managers. So, when they're at ORR, they can be, we can try to find their families faster. So Plan A is our legislation, but Senator Cornyn and I, and of course, Tony and Krista Sinema, we found out that there are certain things that we can do in the appropriation. So some of it might be by the end of the year when we pass an appropriation bill, unless if we look at a supplemental and we might attempt to add some things in the supplemental. More likely not, we will have a supplemental for HSS and Homeland this summer because of the surge.
Thank you, Congressman Cuellar. Senator Cornyn had to run and go vote on the Senate floor, and Congressman Gonzales had to hop off for his next commitment. Congressman Cuellar, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close the press conference?
Well, the only thing, and also I'm going to be talking to the Army Corps of Engineers on some levees down there in Hidalgo County, so I have to hang up also right now. But I do want to say, to all of y'all, thank you for joining us. I want to thank Senator Cornyn. He's been a leader, very bipartisan, and I appreciate it. A lot of people talk about being bipartisan, but not too many people actually roll up their sleeves and actually try to get the job done. Tony also has been great, and I look forward to working with Tony in the appropriations. And of course, my friend, former Blue Dog, Krista Sinema, Senator Sinema from Arizona, who used to be a Blue Dog with me in the House. Certainly, I look forward to working with her. This is a tough issue, but inaction is not the answer, and we have to come up with some ideas. And if anybody out there has a better idea, tell us about it. We'll be happy to sit down and work with you on this. But we intend to be proactive and present some common sense ideas with that. So, lo quiero dar las gracias a todos ustedes. Y esperamos hablar pronto.
Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate all you joining today. I know we weren't able to get to everyone